my flashcards. There's a total of 4 today. I would like to introduce myself to you all. My name is Gianna Altieri, and I'd like to ask you, have you ever heard of Christmas pickles? Not the kinds you eat, but the kinds you hang on your Christmas tree. Some of you may have heard them, and some of you may have not, but I will just go ahead and tell you the little background story to how they came about. It started from an interaction between a Union soldier and a German guard. Now, on Christmas Eve, the jailed Union soldier was begging the guard for some food because he was starving. The guard obliged and gave this man a pickle. Now, the pickle is said to have essentially saved the soldier's life, and as a reminder of this interaction, they now hang a pickle on their Christmas tree. It's unique, right? So speaking of Christmas traditions, a recent one that has taken off is the Elf on the Shelf. The Elf on the Shelf is a small, little, petite elf figurine that, sits on your shelf. It is a scout elf that is sent from the North Pole and manages behavior. Every night, the elf returns to the North Pole, reporting on the children's behavior that day, helping Santa manage his nice and his naughty lists. It goes back to that concept that Santa is always watching. However, the elf does just the opposite of what it was just set out to do. Instead of instilling good behavior, it teaches children to act immorally. Instead of bringing the Christmas feels, it distracts from the true meaning of Christmas. And lastly, it doesn't bring joy to everyone and simply drives parents crazy. The Elf on the Shelf is a negative practice that involves parents' empty threats coupled by children's immoral behavior governed by reward. Deemed a disciplinary device by the Washington Post article, The Elf on the Shelf Must Be Stopped by David Forrick. He claims the elf is a threat, mainly because it is utilized as a disciplinary device. How has it become this device? Well, through things that parents say, such as, be good, or you're going to end up on the naughty list, change your behavior. The elf is watching, and he's going to tell Santa, or be good, or you're going to get coal in your stocking. It's things like that. Now, kids, hearing all this, take it in and act according to what's in it for them, and in this case, presents. In reality, children should be taught to behave according to what makes them and others feel good. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Now, on top of teaching kids immoral behavior, the Elf on the Shelf distracts from the true meaning of Christmas. Katie Turner discusses this in her article, You're a Creepy One, Elf on the Shelf, by stating, by insisting the elf's job begins on Thanksgiving, the elf contributes to holiday creep, intruding on the only holiday that isn't soiled by pride tie-ins. Now, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, there's about a month. Now, in this month leading up to Christmas, all the energy and focus is focused on the elf, as the elf and its gimmicks are stationed around the house up until this time. Now, she also notes that this creep is not only holiday related, as the elf has shown up in the Macy's Day Parade, but it's also commercial, stating that there's the elf itself packaged by the book, the elf accessories, the DVD, and not to mention the elf also starts dispensing gifts as soon as it arrives. And if you didn't catch it the first time, that was in Katie Turner's article, You're a Creepy One, the Elf on the Shelf. Clearly, you can see that the elf is more about consumer culture than it is about the good-hearted message of Christmas. Now, if that wasn't enough, the elf has taken to social media platforms such as TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, and even Instagram, consuming users of these platforms in elf antics. Now, users have gone to posting videos, pictures, memes, tweets, really anything, displaying what their mischievous little elves have been up to, trying to out-elf each other, trying to one-up each other. Now, one of these popularized antics has been quarantining the elf on the shelf. And I'm sure some of you have experienced it. Well, it's the same for the elf. The elf is placed in a little glass bubble jar for 14 days where he does not move from his bubble, and he is cut off from all social contact, which means he does not go back to the North Pole. Pretty excessive, right? Well, this excessiveness was noted by the official elf makers themselves in the Washington Post article, The Elf on the Shelf Must Be Stopped by Peter Vork. in which he noted them to say that we checked with the big man and read himself for the definitive answer to all your quarantine elf questions. And great news, Santa says all Scout elves are healthy and remain well at the North Pole. They're excited to return home to the human world for a season full of excitement and giggles. Since Scout elves are magical beings from the North Pole, they do not get human sickness and do not have to quarantine. Even the elf makers themselves recognized this excessiveness and needed to put an end to it. Needless to say, it is undeniable that holiday creep, consumer culture, and the ridiculous antics of the elf have taken attention off of Christmas and thus redirected it to itself. Now, as the War of the Elves continues to rummage online, it has spread to between competing households, driving parents absolutely crazy. The elf has parents up all night trying to, as what I call, keep up with the Joneses. Now, this is a competitive race egged on by kids and the stories they bring home from school of what their classmates' elves are up to. Now, parents feel an obligation to compete with these other elves and, live up to their children's expectations. This means staying up all night, writing notes, stationing activities, wrapping gifts on the daily, and even baking cookies by night. However, noted by a very tired mom in the Huffington Post article written by Kate Aluda, she notes that, the elf is cute to look at and funny for the 2 minutes it takes the kids to find it in the morning, granting you a hot second to get a cup of coffee. However, it is ultimately not worth the effort or the long nights. Now, despite this clear evidence to take the elf off the shelf, some believe that it should stay on the shelf, boasting that it is a fun and festive way to spice up your Christmas festivities. In the Washington Post article written by Monica Thisa in The Elf on the Shelf, Christmas Toy for Kids or Mind Game for Adults, she states that the elf takes on the personality of the family it adopts. If you are a family that is creative and full of creative people, and your elf enjoys doing creative things at night, then that's your tradition. However, when we get down to the nitty-gritty of things, a tradition is defined by a belief or behavior passed down by a group or society with symbolic meaning, special significance, or origin. Now, by definition, the elf on the shelf is not a tradition, but in fact a fad, and a fad that is doing more harm than good, by instilling immoral behavior in children, distracting from the true meaning of Christmas, and simply driving parents crazy. It is time for the elf on the shelf to come off the shelf. Now, taking it off the shelf would alleviate kids from their immoral behaviors and help them to revert to a more ethical, moral behavior. Taking it off the shelf would alleviate parents from the daily antics, or I should say nightly antics, and the overwhelming amount of stress. And lastly, it would allow families to revert back to traditional Christmas ways to focus on the true meaning of Christmas. Without the elf on the shelf, there's still something to be found in Christmas for all of us. Whether that's, sitting by the fire, roasting marshmallows, making snow angels, snowmen, throwing on those holiday classics, or having a big old family dinner, or even going to Mass. Christmas can always be special with the memories you make of it. After all, a simpler Christmas is a better Christmas. And thanks for listening.